Welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. This is Ramita Iyer, Research Analyst at the Institute. In this final edition of the South Asia Outlook 2023 series, which looks at the prospects and challenges for the region this year, we will be examining the geopolitical outlook for South Asia. If you missed listening to the other episodes in the series, check out episodes 176 and 177, which cover the economic outlook as well as give a broader analysis of what's in store for the subcontinent. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Professor C Raja Mohan, Visiting Research Professor at ISAS. Professor Mohan, welcome to South Asia Chat.
Thank you, Ramita. Nice to be here again.
One of the most significant highlights of the year 2022 was the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the worldwide impacts that it has had on economies and foreign relations. The subcontinent, too, much like most of the world, has been impacted by the ongoing conflict. Almost a year since the invasion, what is your assessment of how the region is coping from a geopolitical and diplomatic perspective?
Yeah, I think given the scale and the intensity and the surprise of this conflict in 2022, I think the region has struggled to adapt to it. We saw India, which has become closer to the United States and the West in recent decades, but still has a strong relationship with Russia, was trying to do a fine balancing act without actually supporting Russia, but not criticizing Russia either, and trying to focus on managing its economic problems that have arisen out of the war, like availability of oil and fertilizers and those kind of things. So India's approach, this balancing, did get some criticism from the West, and I think the government in Delhi is trying to manage that. In Pakistan, we saw former Prime Minister Imran Khan actually show up in Moscow just the day before the invasion was ordered, and he was sitting with Putin when the invasion began. So I suspect the Pakistanis were played by the Russians, and they didn't realize what they thought was really they were reaching out to Russia for the first time, and it was a great opportunity. But it looks like the Russians actually got the better of them. But now, after Imran has been ousted from power, the army is now trying to recalibrate the relationship. While they continue to engage Russia, they've begun supplying arms to Ukraine, and the military leadership is trying to re-engage the United States, because I think there is a recognition that the relationship with the US has gone down and that they need to build up. For most of the other countries in the region, it's really the economic consequences that, given the dependence on imported energy across the region, so for all of them, it couldn't have come at a worse time for Sri Lanka. It couldn't have come at a worse time for Bangladesh, which is generally doing well. But I think the COVID plus the oil crisis generated by this war have all created complications. So I think for the rest of the region has largely been economic management, while for India and Pakistan, there was a geopolitical fallout as well.
So you mentioned the change in administration in Pakistan with the ouster of Imran Khan and the swearing in of Shehbaz Sharif as Prime Minister. Do you observe any implications of the change in political command on India-Pakistan relations?
My sense is, the civilian leaders do not have too much impact or influence on the relationship with India. My sense is it is the army that will continue to dictate the direction, pace, and the nature of the engagement with India. So I won't think that having the PMLN government would make much difference. Second, I think part of the problem is also that while most of the civilians who were part of this government, both Zardari, Nawaz Sharif, they've all been positive towards India in the past. But today, I think they face the potential threat from Imran Khan on the streets. So they're not willing to take any risks in engaging India, even if they wanted to. So my sense is, I think it's also that the electoral cycle, Pakistan will need to have an election sometime soon. India is getting into an election mode. I think it'll be quite hard for the two sides to be able to do something imaginative and creative at this point of time.
Moving from Indo-Pak relations to India-China relations, which continue to be an important defining factor in the region. Just in December of 2022, armed forces from India and China clashed near Tawang in the eastern sector of the Line of Actual Control, or the LAC, which resulted in injuries on both sides. While the official statement released by Beijing a few days after the incident noted that the border situation is generally stable, the broad understanding is that tensions continue to persist. In the coming year, how do you see the bilateral relations unfolding, and what are the likely impacts on the region as a whole?
Look, I think China is the most important external actor today in the subcontinent. And ever since the crisis of 2017 in Doklam Plateau involving Bhutan and the 2020 crisis in Ladakh have put India-China relationship in a deep chill. And 2022, we did not see any major signs of it changing. Now, in the new year, as Xi Jinping has begun a third term, but so far, we've not seen any significant change in the Chinese approach to India. But I think there will be opportunities for the Indian and the Chinese leaders to meet in the coming days and weeks at the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit that India is hosting, the G20 summit that India is hosting. So in all these, there will be an opportunity to engage. But given where China is, that we have not seen much flexibility where China has territorial disputes, whether it is Japan or India. But China is reaching out to Australia, to the United States, to Europe. So they're trying to see how they can redress some of the problems that have emerged in the relationship. But with India, we have not seen any signs yet. But I think India said very clearly, without a change in the border situation, there would be no progress in the bilateral political relationship. Meanwhile, of course, trade continues to grow, so that's a reality. The rest of the region, we've seen both Pakistan and China, which had gone so deep into the Belt and Road, investments, they find themselves in a bit of a trouble. It's not, and both of them have serious debt challenges, which involving China. So I think some of the luster about the Belt and Road projects in the subcontinent, that has kind of been, that shine has dimmed. There is no doubt about it. That doesn't mean China will stop being a major economic actor. It remains the largest trading partner for most countries, and for India too. So I think the economic weight of China, especially on the trade and other domains, will remain a powerful one. And like the rest of the world, South Asia India certainly has to manage the contradiction between the political problems and the growing trade relationship.
Just a quick follow-up. Are you of the view that smaller countries in the region will be forced to pick sides and actually have to choose between India and China? Or in other words, how much agency do the small countries actually have?
No, they don't have to choose. Actually, they have more agency. Because of the rivalry between India and China, their bargaining power grows with both of them. So they can exercise leverage to seek benefits from both India and China. My sense is most countries will do it, unless there is an ideological government like the Maoists in Nepal, where they might say, look, for ideological reasons, they're going to draw closer to China. But even there will be pressures to take advantage of the China-India rivalry rather than having to choose sides.
In late 2022, India assumed the presidency of the G20. We touched upon this issue in episode 163, which looked at India's strategic choices. But now that the G20 meetings have actually begun across various cities in India, could you share your impression on how Delhi intends to use the forum to address its foreign policy and domestic concerns?
Look, I think this is not a great time to be doing multilateralism. There is a lot of enthusiasm in India. Prime Minister Modi is trying to connect foreign policy to the domestic politics. He's taking it to the masses in a way that the G20 summit is a rare thing, and all the top 20 economies leaders are going to be here. So there is an effort to showcase this India's new position to the domestic politics, in the domestic politics. This, I think, is one interesting thing. The second is But if you look at multilateralism objectively today, we have two basic problems. One, the major powers are locked in a conflict. Russia is locked in a conflict with the European countries and the United States. China's tensions with Japan, India, and the US have grown. So, political level, it is going to be very, very difficult to really achieve anything. You remember the Bali summit, where Indonesia was the host in 2022. They could not get all the leaders into the room. I mean, President Putin did not come to Bali. So there'll be a lot of questions whether President Putin will come to India, and if he comes, how do the other leaders react to it? So I think that whole set of issues, as the war, becomes more intense in this coming year, as it looks like there is going to be more escalation. So I think getting them into one room and keeping them well behaved is going to be a very, very big challenge for India. So I think on the political side, there is a real problem. On the commercial and the economic side, the old globalization order is breaking down. There is no agreement between the world's leading economic powers on how to manage the global economic order. Therefore, India's ability to make any big transformative advances in the summit, I think, remain limited. But third, I think it is in the process areas where in India gets a chance, Indian diplomacy gets a chance to engage so many countries at such an intensive level that I think the very act of doing this would give India a great experience and also hopefully more openings in dealing bilaterally with many of these countries. And in the process, if India can generate some consensus on non-controversial issues, something on digital inclusion, health security, if India can get one of those two things passed, which benefit India and the developing world, that'll be a big victory. So I think I would temper expectations that the gains, if there are any, will be modest, and the challenge will be to really manage this difficult moment in global multilateralism.
Finally, we've seen a growing interest in the Indo-Pacific region in the past few years, with several Western countries coming out with their own Indo-Pacific strategies. Where do countries in South Asia feature within this narrative, and how can they leverage their position?
In fact, I think the US is viewing South Asia through the Indo-Pacific prism. That's a big change. For the last 40, 45 years, the main focus has been on Afghanistan, on the terrorism, on the insurgency, on mobilizing a jihad against the Soviet occupation back in the 80s. So Afghanistan was the fulcrum of much of the geopolitics of the subcontinent in the last 40 years. But now the focus is US has withdrawn from Afghanistan. And it is the Indo-Pacific prism that is defining the US engagement with this region. For example, once US has withdrawn from Afghanistan, the value of Pakistan as a frontline state has significantly declined. And once the focus is on China and the Indo-Pacific, the value of India has dramatically gone up for the United States. So the emphasis on Quad, on Indo-Pacific security, clearly demonstrates the new interest in India in the United States. And there is a bipartisan consensus on that. So we've seen the Biden administration elevate the Quad to the summit level. We've seen a series of high-level engagements at the summit level on a range of issues. So the Quad is a consequence of the Indo-Pacific strategy. It's not just India. I mean, in the Himalayas, for example, given the focus on China, the US interest in the Himalayas will continue to grow because in the 50s and 60s, we might recall, Nepal was very important in dealing with the question of the crisis in Tibet. I think the focus on China will bring more attention to Nepal and Bhutan and the dynamic in the Himalayas. And given the importance of the maritime side, we've seen the US taking more interest in Maldives, in Sri Lanka. There is eagerness to step up security cooperation with Maldives. There is eagerness to engage Sri Lanka. So once you focus on the maritime, the small island states become very crucial for the US strategy. And therefore, there is actually a lot more interest in the waters of the subcontinent and in the small island states of our region.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Prof. Mohan. You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates on our work from social media. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.